a lot of the younger Jewish Israeli activists, they started to kind of go into the West Bank through this loosely knit group, Anarchists Against the Wall, and they would join Palestinians in the small villages, Nabi Saleh, Belin, and so on. And that's, that whole cooperation, I feel like it's been crushed by the military and the Palestinian Authority, and I see a lot of them who I've known since that period moving into the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and they're behind a group called Boycott from Within. They're basically calling to the outside world and saying, boycott my country. Why are they doing that, and what do you think of the prospects for the BDS movement? Do you think this might be potentially a game changer and provide some hope?
First of all, I can't blame those young people, as devoted, as courageous as they are. They were crushed, not only by the Israeli army, also by the Israeli media, which delegitimizes them on a systematic basis.
Yeah.
And really their mouth was shut, practically. Either delegitimization in the media, or really physical attacks by the army. And, week after week, and they lost hope in many ways. The only hopeful tool right now, the only game in town which might show some kind of hope is BDS. It's a non-violent tool, a very legitimate one. It was proven extremely effective vis-à-vis apartheid South Africa. And there is no reason in the world why it wouldn't be applied also toward Israel, as long as Israel is continuing to stand behind all those crimes and behind the occupation, obviously.
Yeah. Most Israelis see BDS as it's tantamount to destroying Israel. I mean, how do you respond to them when they say, "Oh, it's just another way of throwing us into the sea"?
Nothing will destroy Israel more than the occupation. And those who care about the future of Israel should better do something about the occupation. That's the biggest enemy of Israel. That's the biggest danger for Israel, morally, politically, economically, and militarily. Anyone who thinks that Israel will live on its sword forever just doesn't know anything about history, because there was no empire which lasted forever, living only on its sword. And BDS has a very concrete goal, and this is to put an end to the occupation. It's a very legitimate goal. It's a moral goal, and I wish I wouldn't say so, but I don't see anything more effective than this.
Right. Let me ask you about your own political development. As I mentioned in the intro, you were a member of the Labor Party in good standing. You were close to Shimon Peres. You were close to the whole peace process and the peace camp. And there's an incredible scene from a short documentary by a friend of ours, Eran Torbiner, where you're in the old Labor Party headquarters, and it's completely empty and kind of being demolished. And it's a symbol for the Labor Party today. The Labor Party today, under Isaac Herzog, is proposing a plan to do away with the two-state solution that it used to really define itself on. So how did you get to where you are supporting the BDS movement? And how did the Labor Party get to this point, supporting Netanyahu's goals?
I think I made a long journey. I'm not sure that Labor changed.
Yeah.
Finally, Labor was always what it is today. There were times in which we believed the bluff, or I believed the bluff. But by the end of the day, Labor carries more responsibility for the occupation than any other political group in Israel. They put the foundations. They did nothing to put an end to the occupation ever. The only evacuation of occupied territories were made by Sharon, not by anyone of Labor. So by the end of the day, Labor didn't change.
Right.
And Herzog is a typical leader of Labor, like Shimon Peres, like Rabin. Oslo, in my view, was a trap. It was never aimed to put an end to the occupation. And the proof is that it never evacuated one settlement. And without evacuation of settlements, your intentions are very, very transparent. You don't mean to put an end to the occupation. And as for myself, this shift that I went through is due only to one thing. to the fact that I started to cover the occupation, to travel week after week, many times day after day, for 30 years, over 30 years.
Yeah.
And what I witnessed, very few Israelis had witnessed. And nobody who is conscious could stick to any other consequences and conclusions but a radical conclusion that this occupation must come to its end unconditionally and immediately because it is criminal.
Yeah. Since we're in Washington, a place where many people are unfamiliar with the images you would see on a weekly basis, just traveling 30 minutes from your home.
Right.
People hear information about this is very hard to get. What do you sense when you come here to this town? Do you talk to any people who are in Congress? Do you talk to congressional aides? Do you ever get summoned to talk to anyone with any influence on policy, on foreign policy in the U.S.?
Unfortunately not. Many years ago, when I was more with the mainstream, I had more opportunities to meet legislators and officials. I'm really banned here. I mean, nobody would talk to me. Not that I tried, I never tried. But I don't feel any interest in my views. American media, most of it, American politicians, legislators, diplomats, they don't seem, I think it's much of a challenge for them to face my views.
Well, welcome to my world.
Exactly.
What role do you see AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby playing in the transformation of Jewish-Israeli society, where you say the stages of fascism are beginning?
Let's talk about definitions. I claim that AIPAC is an anti-Israeli organization, not a pro-Israeli organization. They corrupt Israel. Not only them, but they start this whole process, which enable Israel to continue the occupation with no limitations, with no restrictions. They stand behind this terrible phenomena in which a state like Israel, which is very well off, well equipped, very strong, gets this enormous sums of money year after year, which corrupts Israel. This American money that AIPAC is responsible for getting it, this money corrupts Israel. And therefore, in my view, AIPAC is not only not pro-Israel, in my view, AIPAC is one of the biggest enemies of the state of Israel.
Sheldon Adelson would disagree.
I guess, but not only on this. He would disagree on anything I say.
Well, yeah, he doesn't seem to believe Palestinians exist. So.
I'm so proud to be different than Sheldon Adelson. So proud.
I hope that I get that distinction as well. Just last question, wrapping up, because it's campaign season. What kind of how do you feel about the U.S. presidential campaign? There's going to be a walkout at AIPAC against Donald Trump by some of the figures that you've accused of perverting Israeli society. Hillary Clinton is sort of the challenger of Trump, the presumptive challenger of Trump, but she is also someone who's winning a lot of support from the pro-Israel lobby and reaping a lot of donations. So do you see any hope or anything coming out of this election campaign?
First of all, if I had to choose between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump concerning the Middle East, not concerning other issues, concerning the Middle East, I'd rather vote for Donald Trump. With Hillary Clinton, we know very well. This means the continuance of the support, the automatic blind support in the occupation, in Israel, in all its crimes, in all their attacks. I mean, Clinton is the worst. Donald Trump is unknown.
Yeah.
Might be a catastrophe. But until now, he said some interesting things, like wanting to be neutral.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
Pretty radical.
That's out to be neutral. I mean, I don't think he's a man of justice. I don't think he's a man of morality. I don't think he cares at all. He cares at all about the Palestinians. He hardly knows who they are. really, you look at this and you look at this and you understand that the Middle East is now doomed to another 4 or 8 years of stagnation, of developing and strengthening the occupation even more. Nothing will come from Washington, for sure not from the official. And therefore, again, we are getting back to the important role of civil society.
Yeah.
Because when this is the administration, the only hope will be from campuses of universities, from public opinion, from activists, from NGOs, and from individuals who will raise their voice against.
Yeah. How do you avoid burning out or going crazy? How are you going to survive the next 4 to 8 years? Because I'm asking for myself.
Okay.
You know,
Who told you I'm going to survive? I'm not sure. Listen, seriously, it's much easier than you think. Because when you really believe in what you do, you have no other choice. It's not like I can make a choice. I don't have any other choice. This is what I believe. This is my profession to write. This is the mission I took upon myself. And nobody can change it unless, you know, I'll be expelled, I'll be jailed, I'll be killed, I don't know what. But as long as I am free to choose, nothing will stop me.
Well, I can just tell you, when I started making the transition from covering domestic politics to writing about Israel-Palestine, it was your voice during Operation Cast Lead in 2008, 2009 that really helped me, that really encouraged me, and I think there are countless other people who feel the same. So just as a word of encouragement in closing.
Thank you very much.
Toda rabah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Max. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.